I'm Mitch, and I'm an addict. Wow, this is a lot of people. I've known Shaun for, 25 years. He's been part of my recovery for all of that. Since the day I met him, we've kind of been we just hit it and was friends. And, the funniest thing is we live just far enough apart that we don't talk that often, but we talk when shit's shady. When I get shaky and I need an outside influence, I can call Shaun. The funny thing is over the years we have become more like family because we don't see each other but a couple times a year a lot of times. But in those times we spend some time together and we talk and we get to be part of each other's life and part of each other's recovery. Shaun has been a great part of my recovery, and I'm pretty sure after you hear his story, he might be a part of yours. And with that, I give you Shaun F from Akron, Ohio. Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
I'm an addict named Shaun. Give me just a second. I'm just asking my higher power to help me get out of my own way as I share with you tonight. One of the things that I've found in recovery is that the main thing that has gotten in my way all of my life has been me. I'm almost always the thing that I'm tripping over. So, this is awesome. I'm really excited about this. I've been here in this dining room on nights when it was just wall-to-wall people, and it got really hot in here, and you can barely hear yourself think, and there's all kinds of whispering and rustling and stuff like that. And this is a much more manageable size. I have made an ass out of myself in front of much larger crowds than this. Not clean, probably. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Shaun. I'm an addict, and that's the most important thing. I live in Ohio now. I've lived in Ohio since I got clean. Before that, I moved around a lot. One of the things that is shared a lot, I don't know where it's from originally, but it gets shared when people are going to speak and tell their story, is that all you have to do is tell the truth. And we were talking about that earlier today. And I said something as a joke, but it's actually kind of true, which is that I've been around long enough that the question is, which truth do I share? When I was using, there were a lot of different truths depending on who I was talking to. There was the truth if you were my job. There was the truth if you were my girlfriend. There was the truth if you were my parents. It was all true, at least kind of. Because I'm a terrible, terrible liar. Okay? I don't play poker. I have a shit poker face. If something happens in front of me, you will know exactly what I think about it by the expression on my face, which is not always convenient, especially in work meetings. I have a pretty solid "you're a fucking idiot" face, which But so which truth do I tell? Because I have changed so much since I got clean that what was absolutely 100% true when I first got clean is lies and deceit now. There is shit that I absolutely believed, my version of events when I got clean, and I've had the opportunity to work steps and recover and hear other people work steps and learn about the disease of addiction and learn about the process of being an addict and the process of growing up and trying to become an adult, so that the shit that I believed when I got here is no longer the shit that I believe now. And so there are things that I will say that are about what I used to believe, and there are things that I will say about what I believe now, and there's the process of how I got from one to the other. And everything to do with the process of how I got from one to the other is Narcotics Anonymous. Narcotics Anonymous is the single most important thing in my life. My wife's sitting over there. I'm saying this in front of her. My son's not here, but if he was, that's one of the things I would say in front of him. There's other shit that I wouldn't. But when we got married, so we didn't get married until after I was clean. I thought I had all the clean time in the world because I had like 3.5 years when we got married, and that was the longest I'd ever been clean. But before we got married, I told my wife that I was always going to have to put recovery first, because if I didn't put recovery first, I wasn't going to be able to live up to our marriage vows, and I also wasn't going to be able to be the kind of person that she wanted to be married to. And, I told her that because I wanted that to be upfront and clear before we got married. And I wanted her to be okay with that. That's not exactly the kind of shit you can spring on somebody after you're married. You can, but... So, I was born in 1973 in Providence, Rhode Island. When I first got clean, I would tell you that I had a really normal family, and I had a really decent family, and my parents were good parents. That's not true. I had an incredibly fucked up childhood. Both of my parents were, I can't take their inventory and say that they were addicts, but they used a lot, and it had consequences in their life, and it had consequences in my life. And they made a lot of what I would consider to be poor decisions. And I got bounced around a lot. My parents separated when I was, 6 or 7, and they, from that point until I drew some boundaries with them, they talked a lot of shit about each other. And I knew way more about their dysfunctional relationship than I ever wanted to. And I knew that my dad hated everything about my mom, so I assumed that he hated all the ways that I was like her. And I know that my mom hated everything about my dad, and I know that she hated all the ways that I was like him, because she would tell me so. And so between the two parents hating the parts of me, and there's only the parts of me that came from the two of them, so between my two parents, they hated all of me. That's how it looked from where I was. And that sucked. I don't remember exactly what age I was when I first started wondering what was wrong with me, where I first started asking myself what's wrong with me, but it was way before I started using. You know, I did not fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't go anywhere and feel like I belonged. And I didn't understand the rules. You know, I felt like everybody else had been given a handbook and a set of instructions and a schedule about how to do life, and that I had like been absent on the day that that happened. Because people just seem to go places and intuitively know what to do and which rules you could break and which rules you couldn't break and which rules you could bend. And I had no conception of that. You know, I would follow rules that were really stupid and didn't need to be followed, and I would break rules that were really important and get in trouble for it. And I didn't know how to navigate any of that. You know, so I got bounced around a lot. My parents moved. They're both academics. I ended up living, I don't know, I've lived in a very few places since I got clean, relatively. But for a while, I had lived more different places than I was years old. You know, so I never really had any kind of stability or chance to put down roots or friendships or anything like that. I started using when I was I think I was 13 when I started using, and I instantaneously fell in love. I thought it was fucking amazing. I thought that I had found the solution. I could fit in. I still couldn't dance, but I could move around gently to music enough to get girls to talk to me, and then I could talk to the girls and not just turn red and look at the ground. And then, you know, I was 13, so I found out, you know, girls are soft and nice and they smell good and all that stuff, and that without using, I had no way of talking to them. And so prior to that, prior to starting to use, my drug of choice was books, because my parents would enable me using books to no extent. Like, even if they didn't have a ton of money, they would buy me books. And I think that there probably are things wrong with me besides the disease of addiction, but that I haven't been diagnosed with. You know, when I was in fifth grade, I was reading at like a high school level. I read really fast. So I would just go through books, and I can go into a book. Like, I don't just read the words on the page. Like, I open the book and start reading, and then I'm in the book, and the rest of the world disappears, and it's just like fucking using. I could ignore anything, and it was my safe space. It was my retreat. It was my drug of choice. Books do not get girls to talk to you, at least the kind of girls I wanted to talk to, nearly as much as using. So when I started using, you know, I still read books, but it was on, you know. And, you know, I did the really, you know, the normal stuff. You know, I used this and this, but I was never going to use this until I did. And then it was fucking on, because that was awesome. That was even better than the first thing. And, you know, I had a lot of lines that I drew. You know, I was going to do this and this, but I was never going to do hallucinogens, you know, until I did. And then I decided that I was going to do more than anybody else in the history of the world ever. And, you know, just live in a secret world inside my head. But, so my memory sucks. That may be because of drugs. I've also been told it can be because of trauma. Maybe it's a COVID vaccine, I don't know, but my memory sucks. So my using progressed, in all the normal ways, and I'm really observant. I see shit going on. I see how things work. I know how to mimic behavior. Like I said, I'm a terrible liar, but I'm an amazing believer. And if I believe what I'm telling you, I can be very convincing. I managed to avoid a lot of consequences by believing my own bullshit. I wrecked my first car, and I was using, and there was a girl, and I was driving when I shouldn't have been driving, wasted because of the girl. So stupid decisions based on stupid decisions. I got in an accident, totaled the car. She had to go to the hospital. Didn't have any legal repercussions from that. I managed to avoid, any kind of DUI charges or anything like that. And that kind of stuff, happened a lot. I got pulled over for running a stop sign with, 5 to 10 years worth of drugs on the passenger seat, and the only thing I could think to do was throw a newspaper over it. And I didn't even get a ticket for going through the stop sign because I said there was a tree hanging in front of it, and I should have gone to prison. And that kind of shit is nothing that I ever looked at. Well, it's an example of the different kind of truths. So when I was using, that kind of stuff happened because I was so fucking awesome. Because I was amazing and I had incredible skills. And then in my early recovery, I would tell you that stuff like that happened because I was lucky. Now I would probably tell you that stuff like that happened because I was blessed. Because I was blessed and protected. There are just such an incredible number of miracles in my life. Miracles from the time that I used, miracles, since I got clean. So after I started using, I went to I was getting in more and more trouble. And I went to a private boarding school in Massachusetts for the last 3 years of high school. And I'm pretty convinced that going there was the only reason that I managed to stay out of the legal system. I think that if I'd stayed in the town I was in, where people knew me, and I had a history, I would have ended up in the system and sure, it's not a surprise. Once you end up in the system, once they know who you are, then, they keep looking for you. But this school was a really liberal and progressive place, and they had a no drugs thing, and you could call the teachers by the first name, and there was no dress code, and it was co-ed. And for the most part, I honored that. I only got high there a few times, which for me was the same as none. And I would get completely fucking obliterated on every vacation or home weekend or summer break. I would just spend it destroyed. It would be a bender. And then I would go back there and not, using it for a while. Graduated from high school, super small school. Decided to go to college in Montreal. I'm painfully embarrassed to admit this, but a big reason for the choice of that school was that the drinking age in Montreal was 18. And any of the other schools I applied to, it was 21. And I was 17. and it was way easier to pass for 18 than it was to pass for 21. And the idea of, using was already turning into the most important thing in my life. My first year of college, or I should say my first semester of college, was a shit show. I had a food plan. I made it to breakfast twice. I got put in charge of, so they do things a little bit differently there. Their university system's a little bit different. There's no fraternities at the school I went to. The dorm I lived in was Molson Hall, donated by the Molson family. And in exchange for donating the dorm, Molson Hall, the university had to agree to only sell Molson products in the dorms, because in the dorms they sold beer. And so maybe a month after there, I got put as one of the people in charge of the beer store, which went about as well as you'd think. Because of student contracts and things, they couldn't pay us to do it, so we could just have all the beer we wanted. I don't think it worked out very well for them either, because it turns out I could drink a lot of beer. So that semester turned into a shit show. My mom was actually in Greece on a academic exchange, and I had been planning on going to visit her at Christmas. And I said, hey, what about if I take a semester off and travel around Europe, because the plane ticket won't cost any more than the plane ticket I already have, and I just have to change the return date. And I don't know, I self-willed and dope fiend some shit, you know what I mean? I'm sure that I justified it and talked about how traveling around Europe and looking at historical shit would be educational, and I had a story that made it sound like a really good idea. But it was bullshit. So I traveled around various different parts of Europe, and it was educational. I learned the word for beer in every country I went to. I figured out where Amsterdam is on a map, and I learned that they don't have hitchhiking in Austria by standing on the side of the road with my thumb out for hours. So I traveled around Europe and did dumb shit, and probably gave Americans everywhere a bad name. By not single-handedly though, and I could never embarrass Americans as much as Australians embarrassed Australia. And I did some stupid things. I did some crazy shit. This is years ago, so the political situation was different. Yugoslavia was still a country. There was a war there, but it was the quickest way to get from Greece to Switzerland. So I went ahead and took a train through Yugoslavia, even though they were having a war, because I said it was on the other side of the country, so it wasn't really that big a deal. I saw shit that I didn't really want to see. I saw people getting pulled off the train and beat down with guns by army guys for being from the wrong part of the country. And I kind of thought to myself, wow, this is maybe not a situation you should be in. But self-preservation was of secondary importance to me when compared to using. If I had a choice between taking care of myself and doing something smart or getting high, I would choose getting high every single time. And that's one of the things that I remember most clearly, even before. So smart people can do dumb shit, okay? If you're in this room, you probably know that. According to every testing measurement, I am a smart person. According to my fucking behavior out in the world, I am a moron. And one of the questions, because there would be these good intentioned people along the way, my parents, teachers, counselors, whatever, and they would honestly and sincerely look at me and say, why did you do that? You must have known it wasn't going to work out. What were you thinking? And literally, I had nothing. I had nothing. I didn't know about the disease of addiction. I didn't know about obsession and compulsion. I was stuck with it seemed like a good idea at the time. Because that was I don't know, when I was 12, I stole my mom's ATM card out of her purse and took a bunch of cash out of her bank account. How was I ever going to get away with that? It's not a crime with any escape plan. Same when I was a teenager. My mom had a bottle of vodka in the freezer, and I would always drink it and fill it up to this level, and drink it and fill it up. And one time she's like, "Shaun, why is my vodka frozen?" I don't know, Mom. Must have been somebody else. I'm an only child. You know what I mean? No conception of no regard for consequences, no idea. When I was in college, I cheated on my girlfriend with her roommate. There's no sense of self-preservation. So while I was living in Montreal, so anyway, I traveled around. I went back to Montreal, and all this time, my drug of choice is whatever I can get and relationships. And I was always in a relationship, and I was always cheating on the person I was in a relationship with somebody else who, when the first person left me, I would get involved in a relationship with and then start cheating on them. I did, like I said, step work. Yay, step work. One of my favorite things is in the step working guide about character defects. You do this thing about each character defect, and it's just so fucking painful going through each one, line item by line item. And every single one of them, it says, what would my life be like without this defect of character? And, by the end of that section, because I didn't just have one or two character defects on there. I got a good list. My friends helped me put it together if I. But anyway, so at the end, it says, what would my life be like without these character defects? And I got so tired of writing, my life would be much better without this character defect. I would have so much more peace and happiness without this character defect. People would like me more if I didn't have this character defect. And just by the end of it, dude, I'm just so beat down. But that's good. You know what I mean? I'm assuming that's why it's written like that. I need to be beaten. And so that's what I did to myself, is I just progressively made my life worse and worse and worse. I have gotten to be an expert, or I had gotten to be an expert at rebuilding my life, at moving someplace, getting a place, getting a job, recreating it, getting some furniture, making friends, and then just fucking burning it to the ground. And then going someplace else and doing it again. And after years and years of doing that, shit gets exhausting. And what was happening was that it was taking me longer and longer to rebuild and way less time to burn it down. And when I was rebuilding, it was less and less nice. You know what I mean? So the lows were getting lower and the highs were getting lower. The periods of time when things were fun were becoming much less frequent. So I finally found what was my ultimate drug of choice, and ended up, I lived in an old warehouse loft building, which was something that I had always wanted to do, and like in certain ways my life was awesome, but it was horrible, like on paper, like the individual elements of it, like going to school, has attractive girlfriend that likes you, living in a cool, fun apartment in a great city, but like miserable, self-loathing, self-destructive, unstable, that's the shit that, I wasn't happy. Probably I spend a lot of time. See, wanting to die didn't really come until later, but wanting to not exist or wanting to not feel how I felt was there. So anyway, I started buying dope from the guy across the hall, and I would go into his place, and I would always smell this smell, and I'd be like, man, his place fucking stinks. What is that weird-ass smell? And then after I'd been using what I was buying from him for a while, I can't even remember what was going on, but I was fucking tired and discouraged, and I put my head down on my arms. I'm like, man, I smell like fucking he does. And that was like, well, for any normal person, that would have been a wake-up call. They're like, yeah, so that junkie across the hall that you've been buying dope from and you think he smells bad, like you smell like him, so what do you think? I just kind of laughed it off and ignored it, and it's only in retrospect that I even think about like what I should have taken away from that. Instead, what I took away from it is that I should use more, completely alienate all the people that cared about me, end up having no friends or support group, living in an apartment by myself. The girl that I was seeing left. She took my truck. She took my dog. It's probably good that she took my dog because I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't take care of a fucking plant. The truck I was a little bit salty about. And then I didn't have any obstacles to using. I could devote myself entirely to using, and my level of honesty went from poor to terrible. My parents paid for my college tuition that semester. I went to the bursar's office and dropped out in the dropout window, and they returned my tuition to me in cash, which I promptly mailed back to my parents because it was their money. No, just kidding. So, I immediately spent that all on dope and thought that I was like this will last forever, until it was gone. And, then I found out that what I was using actually had physical withdrawal. And I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be sick. And then I found out that every time I got sick after that was worse than the time that I thought was fucking horrible. And then another red flag that didn't really catch me at the time, but I feel like should have, the guy I was buying dope from told me that I didn't look too good. And said that, he said, you don't look too good. You might want to take it easy a little bit. Dope dealer tells you don't look good, man. You probably don't look good. So, right around then is when I first decided to not try to get clean because I didn't have any concept of clean. I wanted to get off that drug because I wanted to quit having those consequences. And I didn't feel like I had any place to turn to for help. I reached out to my ex-girlfriend and asked her to call my mom. And that's so humbling to me even now that I have a hard time saying it out loud in front of a group of people. Like, not only did I have to go to my mom for help, but I was too much of a coward to actually go to my mom for help. I had to have somebody go to my mom for me for help. And that really kind of demanded me a little bit. I ended up in treatment. Wasn't a big fan of treatment. I had a lot of reality come crashing in on me at treatment. I was clean for the first time in years, and I got this just overwhelming realization of exactly what I had done to my life in full color and full clarity. And I tried to kill myself in treatment. I broke the razor part of a razor out of a safety razor and tried to cut my wrist with it. Anybody who's struggling with that or thinking about suicide, strongly encourage you to find a fucking cleaner way to do it, because that was fucking terrible. It hurt a lot, and I hacked the shit out of my wrist, and I didn't die, but I did get bundled off to the hospital, and I was in Massachusetts at the time, and if you try to kill yourself there, you get to go to a state-run mental hospital. Anybody who hasn't been to one of those, I strongly encourage you not to go. It was fucking terrible. But like I told you earlier, throughout this whole time, from when I was maybe 6 up through this point, when I'm like maybe 23, I had wondered what was wrong with me, and I had thought, as my using got worse, my ideas of what might be wrong with me changed. I thought maybe I was crazy. I thought maybe I, had some different kind of mental illness. I thought maybe I had been born without a soul. I was willing to explore lots of different possibilities for what was wrong with me because I had no idea. I strongly considered the idea that I might be crazy, but people told me that if you're actually crazy, you don't believe that you're crazy, so thinking that I was crazy meant that I wasn't. I don't know if any of that's true, but when I went to this mental hospital, I found out that I wasn't crazy, because a lot of the people in there were fucking crazy. I wanted to make a phone call because I wanted some cigarettes, and they wouldn't let me go buy any. And there was a payphone, and I sat on a chair waiting for this woman to get off the payphone. And she was having a conversation with somebody. She was explaining to them that she was the Queen of Jamaica. And this conversation was just going on and on and on. And one of the orderlies came by, and he looked at me. He's like, "Are you waiting for the phone?" I was like, "Yeah." She's been on a while. And he's like, "She's not on the fucking phone with anybody. There's nobody on the other end of that line." And he goes over to her. He's like, "Hang up. Go back to your room." So I'm like, okay. Well, whatever the fuck is wrong with me, it's not that. So then they have this panel with the doctors where they're going to decide whether they're going to let you out or not. And I was like, dude, I had read one Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'd seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I knew that whatever you do not antagonize the doctors and nurses in a mental hospital, or you will die there. At least that's what I saw on TV. And so I'm like, I am going to be the sanest, most having my shit together person that ever was in this meeting. And I was like, "Can I go home?" And they're like, "Well, why do you think you should be released?" And I was like, "Well, I don't think I'm crazy." They're like, no, we don't think you're crazy either. We think you're an addict. And that was the first time that anybody had ever told me I was an addict. And in my mind, I translated that to, you are addicted to a drug. Okay, because that's the only understanding of addiction that I had, was physical addiction to a particular drug. And so they gave me a meeting list that had NA meetings, AA meetings, CA meetings, fucking all the A meetings, all on one list. I didn't know how to tell them apart. There was meetings I went to where people hugged. There was meetings I went to where people shook hands. I tried not to do any of that. I tried not to make eye contact. I tried not to do anything. But it was the only time I could get a car. And so I would always go to the liquor store after those meetings because, where does it say that alcohol is a drug? Anyway, I was in meetings, and I swear to God, they must have said alcohol is a drug, because I don't think you can go to a meeting and not hear alcohol is a drug. But I did. I went to all kinds of meetings, and I'm not saying nobody said it. I'm saying it didn't go through my ears. That was that person's version of the truth. So that's really where I started doing the plan that I came up with, where I was going to avoid all consequences by only using legal liquid drugs. I was going to stay away from all the other drugs, and since this was legal and socially acceptable, it was going to be fine. And, I don't have any problem going into an AA meeting and saying that I have some friends in AA. If I go to a meeting with them to visit, I will say that I am an alcoholic. I do not have a problem saying I'm an alcoholic, because if you expose me to alcohol, it is a fucking drug. That's not all that I am, because I can't do anything else either. But among, but I had to prove that point to myself. I did not believe what anybody told me. I did not believe what I had seen from anybody else. That was a lesson I had to teach myself, and I ran really hard with that, and I proved that I could destroy my life with just alcohol. Until while I was doing that, I came across somebody who had some good drugs, and then it was back on. And then it went, how I had said the lows were getting lower, and every time I rebuilt shit, it was going downhill faster. That last time, it went downhill like that, man. I went from having a job and an apartment and a girlfriend and friends and some trust and some credit to sitting by myself with all of my fucking bridges burned, with a big pile of dope in front of me, wanting to kill myself again. And thank God I'm an addict, okay? Thank God I'm an addict, and thank God that addicts are untrustworthy, shady motherfuckers. Because an addict will steal your dope, okay? And the only reason that I'm alive here in front of you today is because I am such an addict that I stole my own dope. That pile of dope in front of me on the table was enough to kill me. And that's what I was going to use it for. You know what? But first, I'm going to get really high. So I got really high. And then, I don't know, later, what the fuck is time anyway, So at some point later, there was a much smaller pile of dope, and I'm like, that's still enough. It'll work. And so I tried to kill myself by overdosing. And, I woke up face down on the carpet, having had some seizures and bitten most of the way through my tongue, and kind of feeling like you feel if you've been passed out on the carpet for a day or two. But that's the last time I used. Okay? And that was, I don't know exactly, but my clean date is July 13th, 1999. So I've had the pleasure of not using for the last 24 some years. And that was my first step. You know what I mean? because I didn't think that Narcotics Anonymous was going to help me. I thought this was a fucking cult. I thought it was like the gateway into some weird-ass religion, maybe some kind of pyramid scheme. I thought you all were crazy. I thought there was going to be like just weird shit. And I absolutely did not believe that you guys were going to be able to help me in any way. But I had tried everything else that I could think of, including killing myself twice. And I couldn't kill myself. I taught myself the lesson that I couldn't live using, I couldn't live clean, that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and I needed help from anywhere that I could find it. And a guy from another fellowship said, hey, you know, why don't you let me take you to one of these meetings? He's like, I'll drive you there. I'll come in with you if you want me to. I'll stay in the car if you don't want me to. And he took me to my first, and I'm going to call it my first NA meeting. It wasn't the first NA meeting that I had ever been to, but it was the first NA meeting that I had ever been to actually looking for help. And there was one guy there. There was one guy there. So if you're ever opening a meeting and you're the only person there and you think that you're wasting your fucking time, you're not. Because somebody might walk in. And I walked in and he let me tell my story, and he gave me a meeting schedule, and he told me where some other meetings were. And I tried to go to a meeting the next night. That was on a Wednesday. I tried to go to a meeting on Thursday, but man, it was hard and confusing, and I couldn't figure out which door, and I tried different doors. And so if your meeting's hard to find, put up some signs, because I drove around the block 6 times, went to 3 different doors, and finally I just gave up. But I didn't give up and go use. I gave up and went and stared at the TV until I could sleep. And I went to a meeting the next day on Friday, and that was the first time in my life that I had ever gone home. Because that Friday night meeting was then my home group for years, 10 years, 12 years, I don't know. And those people welcomed me in like family, and they took care of me, and they loved me, and they got me to do the right shit in spite of myself, and they hugged me. I weighed like 170 pounds, and I smelled bad, and I couldn't talk because, a couple days before that, I'd had a seizure and bitten through my tongue. I didn't tell you the story about how I had burned some of the hair off my head because I had a candle and was leaning over. And anyway, so I was a hot fucking mess. You know what I mean? Like I was in the kind of place where when I would walk down the sidewalk, people with children would literally take their fucking children to the other side of the street. And these people loved me. And they got me to participate not just in the program, but also in the fellowship. They tricked me into participating in the fellowship. They would go out to dinner every night, and they would say, "You want to come to dinner?" I'd be like, No, I'm busy. I got things to do." Which bullshit. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have any friends. I had to go home and watch TV and cry at the commercials because I hadn't had fucking feelings in 10 years. And when there was a fucking puppy running on the toilet paper commercial, I would start fucking sobbing, which I did admit for like 10 years because I'm fucking tough and stuff. But so I wouldn't go out to dinner with them because, I don't know, I didn't know how to participate in anything. And this one guy was like really fucking casual one night. He's like, "Oh, what are you doing after the meeting tonight?" Just real conversationally, And I was like, "No, nothing. I don't have any plans." And he's like, "Good, come out to dinner with us." And I was like, "Oh, fuck. I already admitted that I wasn't, son of a bitch." And I was like, "Oh, I can't. I don't have any money." And he's like, "Don't worry, I got you." And I was out of excuses, and I went out to dinner with him. And, then I went out to dinner with him for like the next 10 years. Those people And they wouldn't explain shit to me. You know, I'd be like, well, what is all this stuff? They'd be, shut up and come back next week. You know what? Don't come back next week. There's a meeting Sunday that you should be at, and then there's one on Monday you should be at. And then if you can drive someplace, there's one on Tuesday, but if you can't, there's one on Wednesday, and you should probably be there. I had 2 home groups for a while. I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. But I went to both of them all the time, and people waited until I wasn't fragile to be like, hey, dude, you know what? Maybe you should just go to that meeting instead of having 2 home groups. And you probably shouldn't vote at both of them either, just saying. Everything since then has been a fucking miracle. So I can't remember if I already told you, but I did the math or looked at the step work. No, I got distracted and never got to my point. So because of the step work, I found out that every relationship that I had ever been in up until I got clean, I cheated. There was not a single relationship I was in where I did not cheat. 100% failure rate. I have been faithful to my wife for the 20 years that we have been married. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We got to go to take a trip to the U.S. Virgin Islands. It was beautiful. We took our son with us because he's awesome and we love him, and he's never seen me get high. And he's amazing. And sometimes I yell at him, but I don't yell at him the way my dad yelled at me. And I don't tell him bad things about his mother, and I don't think for the most part his mother tells him bad things about me. That one might be up in the air, I don't know. But the point is, I've had the opportunity to break all these different cycles. And, you know, so it's not just a miracle for me, it's a miracle for him, you know. And I could tell you that when I first started coming to Ripley in 2001, there was a lady that had this really cool blue Toyota truck, and I just thought it was so awesome, but I couldn't afford anything like that. I have a big blue Toyota truck. I love it. You know, I have a motorcycle that I really like. My wife doesn't like it as much. Last year, I laid my old motorcycle down on the highway, going pretty fast, and lost some skin, and it wasn't real good. But here's the thing. I didn't die. I broke my pinky, you know, and I lost a bunch of skin. But as motorcycle accidents at highway speeds wearing a T-shirt go, it was fucking awesome. And the other part of it is I didn't have to use. You know, I told them I didn't want any. They offered me some painkillers. I told them I didn't want any painkillers. Then they started picking the gravel out of my skin. And I said, you know about those painkillers? So they gave me a shot of something, but I didn't take anything home with me. I had surgery on my knee. They put me out for the surgery, but when I went home, I took ibuprofen. Ibuprofen's pretty fucking amazing. Ibuprofen and Tylenol together are even more amazing if you alternate them. I've cracked teeth. I mean, I'm not the most coordinated person. I fuck myself up a lot. You know, I stuck my finger in an air conditioner and peeled all the skin off it and got stitches. Didn't have to take any painkillers. I can do a lot of shit without taking painkillers. And it's not that there's anything wrong with taking them when I have to. But my idea of when I have to and a doctor's idea of when I have to are completely different. Just because they'll give them to me doesn't mean I should take them. Because I don't want to go back to that life. I have a home group. I participate in service. I have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor. I will sponsor people. I have sponsored people. I work steps. I do all of the things to the best of my ability at any given moment that I was told to do to get here and stay here, because I don't want to go back to the life that I had. What I have is fucking amazing, but not perfect, because I'm still an addict. You know, I can still make bad choices on a day-to-day basis. I can still do stupid things on a day-to-day basis. But if I don't get high, I have a chance to improve. I have a chance to work on it. You know, I have had some anger management issues at various points. There are many things that have gone airborne in my vicinity when I was angry. But I don't have to act out on that the way that I used to. You know, as long as I stay clean, I have the opportunity to improve in any area of my life that I choose to improve in. You know, I'll tell you one last thing. When I got here, or when I was in meetings, and people said that they had lost the desire to use, I thought that they were lying and boasting. And I thought it was bullshit. I didn't see how anybody could ever lose the desire to use. You know, and I did lose the desire to use. And it has stayed lost. And that's amazing. I mean, that is a gift. That is one of the miracles of my life. Another one is that in all of the stupid things that I did, all of the driving that I did when I shouldn't have been driving, I don't believe that I've ever killed somebody. You know, I never cleaned blood off my car in the morning. It's a good sign. And, you know, and actually, even though I've had cops point guns at me, I've never been arrested, which is another miracle, not because of anything that I did to deserve it. So there's one paragraph in particular that saved my life when I read it. And it's in the basic text in two different spots. It's on it's in the beginning of the book, but it's also on the blue dust jacket. Many books have been written about the nature of addiction. This book primarily concerns itself with the nature of recovery. If you are an addict and have found this book, please give yourself a break and read it. And that was the first time that it had ever been introduced to me that I could give myself a break. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.
Rather pray inside.